Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hunter Russ. I'm a Senior Program Officer here with the Bob Woodruff Foundation. I welcome everyone joining the call today, and I look forward to hearing from our expert panelists. For those of you who may be less familiar with the Bob Woodruff Foundation's Got Your Six network, it's the largest non-governmental network of organizations serving our military and veteran community. The network includes over 350 organizations of varying sizes, maturities, and focus areas. I'm confident this content will be helpful for our partners who are boots on the ground in serving the military veteran community. In 2024, the Bob Woodruff Foundation partnered with Navy Federal Credit Union to support military service members and their families through the 4 military relief organizations. This permits us to ensure critical resources are ready and available to those who give so much in service to our nation. Thank you to Navy Federal Credit Union for sponsoring this webinar as part of the Bob Woodruff Foundation and Navy Federal Partnership to support military families. We're honored to be joined today by Dietrich Coleman, Rear Admiral Upper Half, U.S. Navy retired and Chief Executive Officer of Navy Federal Credit Union.
Thank you, Hunter, for the introduction, and thank all of you for joining us today. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to partner with the Bob Woodruff Foundation and the Military Relief Societies. As Hunter mentioned, last November, Navy Federal Credit Union launched a multi-year partnership with the Bob Woodruff Foundation, the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, the Air Force Aid Society, Coast Guard Mutual Assistance, and Army Emergency Relief. Each of these groups provides services that are essential to the needs of the military members and their families. And many of our members at Navy Federal have directly benefited from those services. Most recently, during the various hurricanes that hit the East Coast, as well as the big one out in Guam over 2 years ago. Navy Federal is a not-for-profit financial institution. We were founded in the middle of the Great Depression by 7 co-workers at the U.S. Navy Department who believed their voices and their financial futures would be stronger together than they were alone. They pooled their resources and invited their friends to join, and Navy Federal became a place they could turn to for their banking needs. A lot has changed since then, with over 14 million members and a current asset size of $185 billion. We've gradually expanded our membership umbrella. Today, any active duty service member, veteran, DoD employee, or family member is eligible to join. And the scope of our financial products and services continues to grow. But at our heart, we are still the same institution we were 92 years ago. We're still a member-owned credit union. We still strive to offer competitive financial products at great rates, and we still want to provide the best possible banking support and financial guidance to our members. From that core mission come other priorities and other values that also push us forward. That includes doing whatever we can to take care of our nation's military community, not just those from within our membership, but our entire member base. Everyone here today knows how big of a task that can be, given the range of challenges facing our active duty military members, veterans, and their families. Fortunately, there are tens of thousands of 501c3 groups dedicated to supporting our service members and veterans. But knowing exactly where to turn for the right solutions or resources can be daunting. That's why we're so grateful for everything the Bob Woodruff Foundation does, working with the Got Your Six partner organizations, including the relief societies, to simplify this process and get people connected to the support they need. Part of our strategy at Navy Federal is built around supporting members when they face life events that are unique to the military community, such as a PCS or a transition out of the military. Financial guidance for service members is critical in these moments, but only one aspect of these life-changing events, and we want to be there for them at every step of that journey. That is why we value meaningful partnerships with the groups that are equipped to serve our members' other needs, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to connect with those organizations whenever they need help. Ultimately, we can tackle so much more together than we ever could on our own. I'm thrilled today for all of you to learn more about the work the military relief societies are doing. These groups share our commitment to America's active duty service members, veterans and their families. And we're so thankful to be able to support part of what they do for those who serve our nation. So thank you again for joining us here. Thank you, Hunter, for letting me say a few words, and I'll turn it back over to you.
We're here for military-connected organizations and BWF's Got Your Six network to learn more about each of the relief organizations. According to the Bob Woodruff Foundation's 2023 Got Your Six Community Survey, approximately 80% of our network serves either active service members or members of the Guard or Reserves. We're hopeful that this conversation will promote collaborative opportunities between the relief organizations and other members of our Got Your Six network. A predominant strength of the Got Your Six network and a motivation for participating in the network is that organizations can focus on their strengths to do what they do best and partner with other network members to address the broader needs of those they serve. No one organization can or should try to address all the needs or try to serve all types of individuals. Today, we aim to increase both effectiveness and efficiency with additional connection. When relief organizations refer clients to other organizations in the Got Your Six network, we can divert or avoid poor outcomes due to financial strain. When Got Your Six partner organizations have a service member with immediate needs, they should have a streamlined path to the relief organizations. The relief organizations share the common goal of supporting their respective service members and their families by providing essential services and assistance during times of need. They offer emergency financial help through no-interest loans and grants, ensuring readiness and stability, and educational support through scholarship and grants for dependents. Additionally, these organizations address the challenges of military life by offering community programs that assist with issues like childcare, spouse employment, and other family needs, ultimately aiming to ease the burdens on military families. But I really want them to talk about their programs, and therefore it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Tony Grinston, 16th Sergeant Major of the Army, U.S. Army retired and Chief Executive Officer of the Army Emergency Relief. Army Emergency Relief helps active duty soldiers and their families. We have Brooke Millard, Commander, U.S. Coast Guard, retired and Chief Executive Officer of the Coast Guard Mutual Assistance. The Coast Guard Mutual Assistance aids active duty and retired members of the U.S. Coast Guard, as well as their families and other related personnel, including government staff members working on Coast Guard bases. We also have Bob Ruark, Lieutenant General, United States Marine Corps, retired, and Chief Executive Officer of the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. The Navy Marine Corps Relief Society provides support to active duty and retired sailors, Marines, and their families. And finally, we have Ed Thomas, Major General, U.S. Air Force, retired, and Chief Executive Officer of the Air Force Aid Society. The Air Force Aid Society assists active duty airmen, guardians, and their families. Thank you all so much for joining us, and really excited to have a great conversation. So we'll kick it off. Each of the military aid societies represented here today has an official aid society for their respective service. What does that mean, both in form and function? Brooke, I'll start with you.
Great question, Hunter. So happy to be here. Thanks for joining us, everybody online, and for your support of the military aid societies. So we are official relief societies. And what's interesting is we're actually written in congressional law that our organizations support the military service that we provide support to. And that makes us a little different than a lot of other nonprofits out there. My board of directors at Coast Guard Mutual Assistance is representative of the community we serve. The chair of my board is the commandant of the Coast Guard. And the person who signs my evaluation is the assistant commandant for personnel in the Coast Guard. So that's an admiral, which is a really strange dynamic when you think about it. But it also allows us to have like really a lifeline to the Coast Guard. And it's reciprocal in that not only will the Coast Guard call CGMA if there's like a problem with a pay issue where they start to say, hey, this is going to happen, CGMA, can you support us in this way? We're there for them. But it also allows the Coast Guard to actually actively campaign for Coast Guard Mutual Assistance and donations on federal property, which is unusual they can't do that for any other nonprofit. They're allowed to campaign for combined federal campaign, during the month of February, probably March, but they're allowed during the month of April and May to campaign for just Coast Guard Mutual Assistance. So that helps us with our donations. And they're allowed to actually publicly endorse, in uniform, the services that we provide an organization. So that's what it is for CGMA. I don't know if it's different for the other organizations. Over.
I'm not sure about Ed and Bob. I'm not sure who signs my report card other than the soldiers. So I think the only difference, I think Brooke and the Coast Guard and the Army are pretty close to being similar. We started in U.S. Code. My vice chief of staff of the Army is our board chairman. So we're definitely ingrained. We have an Army regulation 930-4 that covers what we do. We have a campaign. So we're very similar to the Coast Guard, except for a little bit differences. Like I said, our board of managers and or board of directors is my boss, and which is the vice. So it's very similar. So it's with a couple of nuances. So I think that to me, the Coast Guard and the Army are very close, and I think I won't speak for Bob and Ed, but I think they're a little different.
I would just jump in and just say that, we are unique, all of us together as the service relief organizations, compared to really any other type of nonprofit, because, we're embodied in Title 10 and law. And so, most of us all have a Pentagon access card. We'll go walk the halls of the Pentagon. We'll go bump into the chief of staff or the secretary or others who do kind of write our report cards as our board. And that relationship has been absolutely critical, because the only way that we're really going to be able to do our job well in terms of awareness, in terms of understanding, in terms of meeting the right needs that we need to meet, is to be able to have strong, healthy, responsive relationships with our service. If we don't have that, we will not be effective.
Okay, and from my end, hey, listen, we were most of us founded in 1904 from the proceeds of an Army-Navy football game, which I think Army won, unfortunately, for my part. But hey, we are the official charity of the Navy and the Marine Corps. Our board is the Navy and Marine Corps leadership. Enough said, that's senior enlisted and senior officers. I report to them. I'll be honest with you, they don't have time for, I think, any of us. We're pretty much independent. That's why we are one of the few nonprofits that actually work together very well among all four of us. And that's our strength, I really think. What do I depend on the Navy for? Retiree fund drive, the active duty fund drive, facilities, offices. We have like 52 offices on naval bases, and we also have facilities on ship. We have satellite offices all over the country that are run by volunteers. But and we basically, I think the best part about us is that we're there, and we're there on site. We do our business very confidentially, and we're right there with the sailors and Marines. So that's kind of what we like. That's how we were born.
And based on all of those, so it sounds really essential that the leadership is there and is an element to the work that you guys are doing. Is there anything that you perceive as barriers of access to the support that you guys provide as the individual organizations?
I say we've coined a phrase here in the Army Emergency Relief, like, man, I didn't know it was so hard to help people. Because I think people feel sometimes in the Army, even out talking to folks, it's like, well, you're a CFC or you're this, you're not. And I'm like, no, we're the Army's nonprofit. We only help soldiers active duty, and we're your organization. So a lot of the barriers sometimes are actually internal for me. It's like, wow, we're just trying to help you. So those, believe it or not, I get a lot of friction about people not actually knowing exactly about AER, although we have active duty soldiers on our board. We helped 35,000 soldiers last year. So we're constantly helping people, but we're also informing them about what we do. And that's a huge barrier, is that they just don't know who we are until they need it. And then it's crisis mode. It's like, where were you? Why aren't you here? I was like, well, I've been telling you that for like 10 years. So that's usually my biggest barrier, is just telling for getting support to the soldiers, because I love soldiers and their families, and I want to help them, and they just don't know that we're there, and I'm working on it.
That class they get in boot camp on the relief societies, it goes in one ear and out the other, because there's 300 other classes going on. So in our case, long before I got here, the society became pretty much in person at these 52 locations and satellite offices and on ship at 119 different ships. There's no chain of command in between that soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. They can come right in. And with us, it's, our support goes out to about 198,000 different sailors and Marines, and to include family members, because we have capabilities to do that. But with us, it's just, hey, come on in, please come in, or go to the website, or call us, one or the other.
Yeah, and I just tag on and say it's awareness and understanding that they pretty well covered, because that's harder and harder today.
Yeah.
I mean, cutting through, penetrating the crowded environment. I think Dietrich said, there's tens of thousands, there's like 50,000 military nonprofits, and cutting through that so people know. And the second thing I'll say is willingness, because there are people who are ready and willing to come. There's others that they're a little standoffish. And what we want them to understand is we're a benefit to service like anything else. We're not about the extraordinary in most cases. We're not about the mad, the bad, or the sad. We're like, when life happens, when that unexpected financial crisis happens, we want to be there to help our service members, and we want them to be willing to just reach out and let us help them.
And I really love kind of that you all understand some of those barriers and just being able to find creative ways to address that. So really, really love that. I know you guys touched on it a little bit, both in the first two questions, but would love to hear some examples of the types of financial emergencies that military families might face and how each of your organizations steps in to provide that relief.
I was in Key West a few weeks ago doing our unit visits. I visited 15 different units in South Florida. And I was on the one ship, I won't say what name it was a major cutter. They had 100 people on board. And they were describing the situation where in Key West, it's not Oconus, it's like continental United States, but there's a lot of things in Key West that are very expensive, and there's some limited resources there. So this one E5 member had a baby. The baby had to go to the NICU in Miami, Florida. That's 3 hours away. And for some reason, they didn't call CGMA. They called a couple different organizations to try to get some sort of lodging to help pay for his stay near the hotel. Didn't happen. The guy was driving back and forth. That same day, a couple of hours later, I'm at a different unit and I'm talking to somebody else in the Coast Guard. He was a chief. He said, I had a member who was an E5 who had a baby that had to be medevaced from Lower Keys Medical Center to Miami for some had heart surgery, open heart surgery, like 5 days old. And we called CGMA and we said, hey, what can you do, CGMA, to help him with his hotel, his lodging, because they want to be close to the baby as she's going through this medical treatment. So CGMA helped him out. We gave him a loan and a grant, a combination of the two, because he had $7,000 expenses for that hotel stay. They were able to stay down in Miami with them for the couple of weeks that the baby was in the hospital. But what's crazy is I call it the tale of two peers, because you have this barrier of communications. One crew didn't really know much about CGMA, what we could provide. The other crew knew what we could do. We got the person the care that he needed at the time in his life. So that's just something that we do. We take care of those emergent situations as needed to help the family, help that person out, in that situation.
Brooke, you mentioned both grants and loans. Does anybody, I think all four of the organizations do that. Does anybody want to touch on that a little bit more and kind of explain what those differences are and maybe how you're making that determination as well? With
grants and loans, one of the important things we want to do is provide financial education. And to do that, we have trained caseworkers that can really work on a budget. And really, a lot of times our folks come in, they're 18, 19 years old and they need some help. And so we sit them down in an office and find out the real problem very confidentially and non-judgmentally. And we'll lay that budget out with them. And that's one of the in-person things, one-on-one, that's really important to them. And I think that's part of addressing some of the challenges they have. They know they don't make a lot of money. A lot of times, because everything is virtual now. I mean, today we had a Marine coming in and he's trying to read his LES, his leave and earnings statement, on his iPhone. And nobody, I certainly can't do it. That's why I got these glasses on. But in other words, when they come in and they can say, oh, this is how you do this. And then also the referrals they can get to a lot of the organizations that can help them. Some of them VSOs out them too. But yeah, we're there to answer those questions. And kind of a lot of our folks are young and they need some indoctrination to what's available out there.
I would say just a little more specificity for us is we look at surplus. We're clearly looking at budget. Yeah. I can give you the good and the bad of those stories. We had somebody, I'm not, tell you the rank, was like, hey, we need help with my rental property. So it's like, okay, that's not Army emergency relief, and your surplus is $1,000 to $2,000 that you've got in your budget that you could pay for that. And so, but what we do see when I work sometimes back in the assistance. I mean, there's no surplus. They're in a negative. That it's like, okay, if we give them a loan, they're not paying their bills now. So we have a line that says there is a surplus in their budget based off the budget they provide us. And if that's so small, why would you give them a loan and just create more problems, even though it's interest free? Maybe we need to look at a grant. So it's really based off what Bob was saying is for us, grant versus loan is, do you have the ability to pay this back? Are we going to hurt you in the long-term stability of financial readiness of your family? And you don't have any surplus to pay the loan back, then we need to look at a grant.
And I was just going to add on, because we're absolutely looking at the same things that both of you guys mentioned. But I'll also add on that all of us have been doing this nearly since our inception, because a lot of people would look and go, well, why give a service member a loan if you could just grant them the money? But there's a couple things. One of them is it helps us help a lot more people. It helps us circulate millions of dollars at zero interest. Now, this is the other part I want to hit on, that zero interest piece. Used to, we had a problem with loan sharks. Literally outside of Fort Hood, Texas, where I grew up or whatever, you'd go out and there would be all these little loan shops, payday loans at exorbitant interest rates. Those aren't as much of a problem now, but, I went down to San Antonio, Texas and visited our bases down there. And I had some first sergeants I was meeting with, and they're like, sir, but now they have payday loan apps. And we've got airmen that will extend themselves on 7 or 8 different apps at these high interest rates. So where it's appropriate, we come in, zero interest, help them, connect them to financial counseling and resources, and get them back into good, stable footing. We want to help them.
Hurricane Helene came through Florida last 2004, and we had a crew member arrive to Station San Key at E5 a couple of days before their unit had to evacuate for Helene. Well, because of a named storm in the area, he couldn't get insurance for all his household goods, which he had just moved into his home. And so he left, evacuated, came back, typical Florida rancher, single level. He had 6 feet of water in his house and in a sewage backup. And he lost all of his household goods stuff was destroyed because of the mold and stuff. At $24,000 of a, itemized receipt, here's all the things that you just moved into your house. Well, that's a situation the Coast Guard put him in. We didn't want them to be, live with that for the rest of their life and have to pay back a $24,000 grant or loan rather. Yeah. And so that received board of approval. It actually received some support from Bob Woodruff and Navy Federal as part of that. And we were able to give that person the $24,000 grant to make him whole.
This Hurricane Helene that came through, there's been, some of the services have moved their bases and their locations around a lot. So one of the ones we found out about quick was this command called the Navy Information Operations Command that was in Augusta, Georgia. Everybody thought I was talking about golf, and I'm not. But we literally had to send a team from 4 different locations of 4 folks to go and interview about 1,000 of the sailors there and their family members because of all the damages to their homes and everything. And that was about $800,000 worth of grants. So they're out there for those reasons.
And Bob, I would think really what we haven't even talked about is how close we are related and how much the 4 of us on this screen talk. I think that hasn't come up yet, but I'll say I'm really proud to be part of this group. We support each other more than anybody probably knows. Like, how do we do this? And I've said it several times, we are stronger together. And in all those cases, every one of those cases, it doesn't matter if it's an airman, a coastie, a sailor, a Marine, or an airman, they go to any relief society, they're going to help. And I've told everybody in the Army Emergency Relief, we're here to say yes. So I think that's what really doesn't come out sometimes when we do these things is how much we are tied together. And it's not just about one service, it's about service members anywhere in the world can get support with any relief society. It doesn't matter what service you're in.
Yeah, if I can just add, we have reciprocal agreements. And in fact, we had a Marine come back a few months ago from serving with an Army Special Forces unit. And they supported our Marine with his challenges, and and then it was reimbursed when they came back. But I've never seen this in other nonprofits. It's really good.
Well, a lot of us have all served together. So, I mean, we've served together, just like General Ruark and I on the joint staff together. And as we've served in different capacities, our joint teamwork that we brought out of active duty is the same exact way that we get after the mission here together. No difference whatsoever.
And so I know you guys have touched on it a little bit, and each of you are focused on active duty members or Guard or Reserve if they're on those particular orders. But we have quite a few questions specifically for Brooke, Bob, and Ed. Who exactly are you guys serving? So beyond the active duty service members and their families, can each of you elaborate on who else you serve and support?
Yeah, active duty and retired and reservists on more than 30 days active duty. So that population is about 1.1 million, and I think that's probably plenty enough for us right now. So.
Coast Guard is the smallest organization by far, right? We have 42,000 active duty members, but we also provide support for our civilian employees, including our wage grade employees who build our ships at Coast Guard Yard. We have auxiliaries volunteers who are eligible for many of our programs. So I said reservists, auxiliaries, civilian employees, retirees. Also, if you're retired from the Coast Guard, we will support members that way, and families.
Yeah, and essentially the way we look at it is anybody who carries a Department of the Air Force ID, whether that's Air Force or Space Force, we support. That may be the 10-year-old, that just got his ID at the military ID shop, or any of the family members, the active duty members, the Guard, the Reserve, retired Guard or Reserve. So anyone who carries an Air Force military ID or family member ID card, we support.
And I know that was, to the three, but we actually, the Army, mirror exactly the Navy and Marine Corps right now. I say that right now because one initiative I have is to add Army Reserve Title 10, regardless of their orders, meaning they would be eligible full time. So right now, just like the Navy and the Marine Corps do, it's if you're on Title 10 over 30 days. And I'm trying diligently hopefully in this year to add the Army Reserve regardless of the orders. We're asking a little bit for the Army Reserve to help us, just like the Army has people that help us disperse funds worldwide. We're asking the Army Reserve to do that. They've been cooperative. So we're just working through some of the specifics, but that's one of my goals by the end of the year, to add them full time for the Army Reserve. But we're currently, our policy mirrors exactly like the Navy, but I'm trying to change it.
And so I know a couple of you throughout the conversation that we've had so far have mentioned being able to support other individuals. So if anybody comes to you, so how are you guys encouraging individuals to seek support from other organizations, whether that's the other organizations on the screen or in general?
For the Army, we said, and I've told everybody from day one, is find a way to say yes. Mm-hmm. So I just fundamentally think when you run a nonprofit, you got to have a heart of gold. And I know everybody on this screen does. Bob Woodruff Foundation, even the Navy Federal Credit Union, everybody just really wants to help. Sometimes we just don't know how to get the help. So when a veteran calls, that's when I go, hey, I'm sorry, did you retire? Are you on active duty? No. And in our assistance, we have a list of here's the people that can help you. We also have a list that we just send out, said, hey, we don't do it, but these people, here's the list of nonprofits that do. So my philosophy is, and I told this when we did our worldwide training seminar with all our Army emergency relief officers, when somebody comes to you and we don't help them, because we get veterans on the base, like, oh, we need your help. So please go to these organizations. And we don't want to tell anybody we don't help them, but so we don't try to do that. We just try to get them out to Bob Woodruff Foundation and Got Your Six programs that do help.
We can also refer folks that we can't help, sailors and Marines and their family members to, like WIC, for help with food assistance and things like that. And also we can, I think one of the things we can do here, since the audience is VSOs, is talk about the networks. We actually have a board member who's the Secretary of Veteran Affairs for Virginia. And together, this General Crenshaw with the Governor Youngkin, they established this Virginia Veterans Network. So if you go online, you can, it basically shows you who exactly can provide support for education, employment, behavioral health, and things like that. Um, and Yeah, I think that's really critical to be able to know what's out there. And the one thing is, Tony introduced me to a gentleman from Easter Seals, and I learned that some of these nonprofits out there actually have contracts to support, from a medical perspective, both active duty and veterans in some of those very niche capabilities. And I had no idea, but that's just another idea of how we all collaborate together. But very interesting for me.
Well, I think in that same vein, we're constantly looking for partnerships. We're looking for those folks we can partner with to be able to refer people to. I'll just give you a couple examples. So we're working with Mercy Medical Angels that help provide, we provide funds to them so that we can refer our airmen, and they can help provide transportation money for medical expenses, whether that's gas money, airline, private plane fare, if that's required, those kinds of things. And then we had Michelle Horn from Fisher House, Army veteran, sitting on that couch here a couple of days ago going, okay, how can we work with Fisher House to be able to make sure that the folks that are in those Fisher houses, which often, if they're in a Fisher House, they probably have a lot of other needs going on in their life right now, going through that medical emergency. How can we, not just as Air Force Aid, but as each of our organizations, come alongside and partner with those house managers? So we're constantly looking for ways that we can better serve the population we're charged to serve, or those that come to us.
A lot of the audience that we have today is made up of Got Your Six partners, and the four of you are also part of the network. Excuse me. So how are those organizations able to best refer individuals to you guys for services? And does it differ by location? So for example, being down in Key West or being in Camp Lejeune or, anywhere like that?
They can call our telephone number, or they can just refer them to afas.org. And we will take care of anyone that, meets eligibility requirements and that we can help, or we'll work to take care of them in another way by getting them to the right organization.
Our mission is, squarely, let's increase the financial resilience of our Coast Guard community. So if it's a need in that regard, where we can provide, that either financial counseling support, referral support, or grants or loans, send them our way. Our website, you can call our office. We'll be happy to help them out. Same thing. We're like AER and the other organizations. We always try to get to yes here.
We have our 52 offices at the major naval bases and 119 ships and 40 satellite shots, different locations around the country. And a lot, to be honest with you, a lot of folks come to us, particularly volunteers, since we have about 3,000. They come to us through thrift shops. We have 34 thrift shops around the country, and I think at different bases, and that brings us more people than anyone else. To be quite frank with you, about 130,000 or so a year come in and shop there. So, and I think that's how everybody learns about us. So, one of the major reasons. So,
and being able to connect and have those relationships directionally with the Got Your Six network is something that we want to continue to foster and engage. So if you guys aren't able to support, being able to direct out and say, hey, this is a Got Your Six partner, that they can help and support. For example, if you have a veteran who calls, you'd be able to connect them. So really excited to help continue to foster some of those relationships and being able to support the work that you guys do on the call, but also those who are all listening with us. We've had a question come in that I think is really great to talk about. So we've mentioned kind of different ways that we support. And so Brooke, I know you've mentioned a larger amount, and Bob, I think you've mentioned it as well. But is there a maximum dollar amount? So when organizations are referring into you, is that something that they need to be conscious of you can only support potentially up to $2,000 or whatever that amount might be?
I was just kind of smiling because of that last webinar we had. So we did have a webinar. This kind of a very similar question came up, and it was talking about a house. And we had this individual, actually it was after a hurricane. We had a soldier, for whatever reason, like you said, you already heard a similar story like this. We had a soldier, Sergeant First Class Bonez, house got flooded, whatever reason, did not have flood insurance, maybe because people stopped giving you flood insurance in certain areas. So lost his house. We ended up with $50,000. So the question was, well, what if they lose their whole house? What would you do? I said, well, I'll try to go find the money to get them a house. So, and then jokingly, I said, I'll ask Bob Woodruff Foundation to help us pay for that house. So when we looked at our bylaws, and I looked at it one more time, I don't see a cap. A lot of things we do cap. We got people in Guam, we've got soldiers in Guam, we got a Navy, we have probably every service. Yeah, Coast Guard, there's a Coastie in Guam. It would be if they had a hurricane and they're displaced and they're all in a hotel, the Army gets $600, the Coastie gets $500, the Marine gets, yeah, because they're pretty tough, right? They'll get $200. And so we do talk about certain limits for grants, especially if something common is happening to all. And that's where a lot of people, oh, you capped it at this. So, and then I just told you we would ask from the Army perspective is come back and say, hey, I know we did this for right now, but here's what I really need. And then, but like I said, in the Army emergency relief bylaws, I don't really see a cap. Now, if I gave all the money away, I'm sure the board would fire me. But we don't, as an Army emergency relief, I didn't see anything in our bylaws that says you can only do this for a one-time event.
In Coast Guard Mutual Assistance, there's an approval authority kind of hierarchy. So we have over 500 Coast Guard Mutual Assistance representatives located at different units around the Coast Guard. These are volunteer collateral duty blue suiters who can authorize a certain amount if the requisite paperwork is completed, including that budget, right? Yeah. So they have some decisional authority at the very low level at each unit. But then, that $24,000 grant for that sailor, that went to the board of directors approval level. And so I think that, and most things over $6,000 goes to the board of directors approval. And that way you get the weigh in from the rest of the crew. People know what's going on in the Coast Guard and they say, is this happening frequently? We can just keep a bigger picture of some of these large asks. Over.
And from our end, we can, we've all had quick assist loans where they can come in real quick and get $1,000 interest-free loan, but that doesn't always answer the issue. And it was real popular. And so we're looking more to doing more casework to understand their budget, to give them financial education. Occasionally we got the crazy case where the sailor or the Marine got hit with some kind of bill, like a $6,000 transmission repair. Yeah. That, they went to a payday lender online, like Ed was talking about earlier, at 35.95% interest that they can't possibly repay within 24 months. And we'll pay that whole thing off and then give it back in some sort of interest-free loan or possibly a grant as part of that. But in those severe cases, we can all, I think we all have the authority to help and we all want to.
I think this is a great question, and because it kind of goes to the scope of what most of us do. And I would say on average, we're probably given $1,000. It's enough to get them through that financial pinch. First sergeants and others may come in, military family readiness centers at bases, our own incredible caseworkers that are counseling them and helping them. But then there may be other cases where you have extraordinary circumstances, or maybe not extraordinary. Maybe you get a senior airman with 2 children and they blow their transmission on their Hyundai or whatever, and it's $7,000 to get their car running again. And we can come in and take care of that.
And this is a great follow-up or a great lead in into, so after all that emergency support's given at whatever that level may look like that veteran, that individual needs, Bob, you mentioned some financial counseling, but what are the next steps that you guys take as organizations to be able to ensure long-term stability? How are you working with other nonprofits? Is that an opportunity for you guys to refer out and say, here's an area that you could use support in, or be able to kind of facilitate some of those conversations from crisis to stability for those families?
I think I saw, the only stab I can really take of that one is I think I saw a lot of interest in that in the defense appropriations recently. And I think it was, I think it was one of the Blue Star families or organizations that basically said that, hey, listen, what we need to know what else is out there. What can you do in fact, I think they put an appropriation in the bill for food banks. So what a great, and there's also women, infants, and children and things like that, which is, when you're talking about the basic needs, which is what we're trying to deal with the junior enlisted population, and particularly those that are married. I think there's more and more focus on that right now, so we can really help them. And particularly with this, I think one of the best things they did, I don't know if it's what the impact is. I probably have to ask Tony or the other folks here, but with this 10% additional pay raise for E1s, D4. So quite frankly, I don't know what the impact of that. Probably ought to ask Tony what he thinks about that.
I had a lot of research on this personally. I took over in January last year, and I looked at, you know, what do nonprofits do? And we'll take a hurricane. A hurricane comes through, and you'll see the Red Cross out there, you know, feeding families, and then you may see USAA or Navy Federal Credit Union, and they're out trying to help money. And they have a rep there, and they're trying to repair houses or insurance and all these things. So, and then it's like, well, where's AAR? It's like, we're right there. We're on the base. We're part of the organization.
Yeah.
And I say that because after those wraparound services, because of the people we help, are actually, that long-term care is actually already resides in the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Army. Army Community Services provides all the wraparound service for long-term care. You have your financial planners, you have behavioral health, you know, care after a trauma. So that's why we are a little different, because when I came on, I was like, oh, do I need to do this? And actually, I don't. That's the military's job, is that long-term care. It's just because of the group that we serve. Because I get that a lot from people that don't understand about the Army Emergency Relief or the Relief Societies. We're part of the military. So the wraparound long-term care belongs to the services, and it is covered mostly in law or appropriations. Now, for the 10% pay raise is, I thought about this a lot, that, you know, here's what I have learned in my military career. And I hate to say this as much as it pains everybody. And you all know it is true, because I will see a lot of head nods. Every time I got a pay raise, everybody raised the prices on me, full stop, every time. It's like, okay, well, it was great I got this pay raise. That's number one, is that all of a sudden the prices already went up. But let's call this. So I get a 10% pay raise. 4 years ago, inflation was 8%. I haven't caught up to that. So that's kind of how I feel about that pay raise is. And oh, by the way, you just paid a junior enlisted probably more than you did some of your mid-grade NCOs. And believe it or not, those mid-grade NCOs still come to Army Emergency Relief. That's when the sergeant gets the family, the kids, and they do the PCS move. So I don't think the Relief Society's mission will change one bit. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Sorry.
Hey, Tony, spot on both of those wraparound services, and I appreciate your perspective on the 10%. Super helpful.
Wonderful. Well, right before I would like to get some time for our attendees to be able to ask questions. But before we do, I want to ask one final question right now. So Tony, Ed, and Brooke, you guys are all fairly new in your positions within the last year or so. So Bob, I know you've been in your position for a little bit longer. Is there anything that you guys have learned or been the most surprised about, and why is that? And then we'll open it up for questions. Brooke, I'll start with you.
Okay, man, what surprised me? The competitive landscape surprised me. Either competitive landscape for people's attention, you know, trying to tell them what we do and how we do it. Competitive landscape for even, you know, finding donors and new donors in different spaces to diversify our portfolio of contributions. What surprised me was my organization's rich history. We have 100 years of board of director meeting minutes that met every month for 100 years. I read them all, and I was really surprised about this just like continuous drumbeat of the need, and then CGMA coming in and helping with that need. And it was just it's a beautiful history. And then I was really surprised. I don't know why I was surprised, but my staff is amazing. I mean, they work so hard. They are 100% like on board with this mission, moving forward, and you know, and moving CGMA forward to help our people in the most efficient and effective manner we can. So those are some surprises for me. Thanks.
Ed, I'll hop over to you next.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where Brooke left off. People here love what they do. They love helping airmen and guardians. And a lot of our folks are veterans, they're former military, they're military spouses, they're retired military, or they just have an affection for the mission, the national security mission we do and what our people go through. And I love that. It motivates me. As I walk back through outside the store and go talk to, you know, our frontline folks that are talking to people, I'll just ask them, what kind of calls are you getting today? How are you dealing with it? And they have a passion for what they do. But direct answer to your question, because that didn't surprise me. That was just encouraging.
Yeah.
What surprised me that I took for granted is that I just always saw us as part of the Air Force. If I took a call from the AFAS CEO, retired, whoever, I just saw him as part of the Air Force. It surprised me how much time and attention and tending that relationship requires, because if we don't have super active, super healthy, vibrant relationships, we will not thrive.
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of investment, and it's a pleasure to do it. But when we're working with teammates, the people who we just left, they're dealing with a thrash in the Pentagon right now, personnel changes, war plans, trying to make sure our readiness is where it needs to be. It's hard to dedicate bandwidth to what we do, but they all know it's important, and we've all got to come together to make it happen.
The thing that surprised me the most was as I transitioned from board member to CEO, because I was on the board, FORSCOM and the Sergeant Major of the Army, for like 7-8 years. So I go out and I start talking both inside the Army and out. It's like, I didn't know you existed. Like, so I'm sitting here, I was like, how did you not know about Army emergency? You're in the Army. Well, you never had to use that service, or I think even Brooke said it, there's so much information out there. It's constant churn. You don't know what's real and what's fake. 2 million nonprofits. But talking to soldiers and their families, and like, I didn't know we had that. And then if you think that's bad, you go out and you talk to somebody that's never served in the military, they're shocked that we have a relief society. I've never heard that. So many times I've heard that.
Yeah.
For some reason, having grown up in the Army and been a part of Army emergency relief so long and so much, I just thought, of course, everybody in the Army knows. And then when you talk to people outside the Army, it's like, I usually start with, here's the Army. and then this is what Army emergency relief does. So it really surprised me how little people actually know about their military and their relief societies.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is a great segue. So I'd love to call on some of the audience members that have submitted some questions. So I know Paul Berry with Veterans Bridge Home, asked a really great question about volunteering. Can we pull him up, Corey? Pause while she does that. So hopefully we're able to pull him in for him to be able to ask directly. So this is something we are trying. So it looks like, all right, Paul, if you will unmute and turn on your camera, we'll be able to see you. So Paul, first, I know that you are also, able to speak to some of the work that you do at Veterans Bridge Home, being there in the Fayetteville area of North Carolina. And then I know you had a great question about volunteering as well.
Yeah, just first of all, hats off to all of you. My last billet, I did 30 years in the Marine Corps. I was the Sergeant Major at Marine Corps Installations East. So my wife was a volunteer and did budget counseling 35 and even close to 40 years ago now, right there on Camp Lejeune. And I was, the biggest believer in it as a first sergeant and as a sergeant major. And I would walk across the street, is what back then it was, walk across the street, because you never know. I love how you talked about blending, because that's what we do as a nonprofit. You often have to blend that support. You go to a relief society, you might go to the chaplain's office, you might go to the thrift store. We do the same thing as a nonprofit. We're pretty much across North Carolina. But really my question was, people that are in and around the installations can volunteer, but how can other folks that maybe are not right on top of an installation, but close, like I'm in Raleigh, is there a way to give back? I mean, I know I can donate, but is there other ways to volunteers? But we also talk to folks that are near those bases too, even the Coast Guard up in Elizabeth City. And how can I, as a nonprofit, kind of say, okay, we often help a veteran, or a veteran there's plenty of veterans that don't need anything. They just say, hey, I've been out for a while, and what can I do to volunteer or give back in my community? So anything on that, I greatly appreciate.
I'll start a little bit here. I think that's a great question, Paul, and thanks again for everything you did here, particularly at Lejeune and everything with all the troops. But we're definitely could use the expertise there from VSOs, particularly I think in disaster relief, in leadership. Believe it or not, some of the continuity of care available, those kind of things. how do we reach out and connect with VSOs and leverage what you know and what you do best? And I mean, we have a network, let's say, within our own societies and between us as the 4 military aid societies and with our chain of command. But I'm not so sure. But of course, it's dependent upon our staff and their experience, how good that outreach is. That we certainly know who helps outside the wire of bases and stations. But I think the connections, and particularly leveraging the veterans, and particularly the leadership experiences, the management experiences, and the fact that, like I was kind of saying earlier, a lot of these, a lot of these nonprofits do things for the military that we may not even be completely aware of on the active duty side. And I think there's a lot of cross that could take place, particularly with helping each other out, things like that, disaster assistance, like I was saying earlier. And we could have used some help in Hurricane Elaine. I think everybody could have, to be quite frank with you. So.
Paul, we
Yeah.
just launched an ambassador program at Coast Guard Mutual Assistance earlier. I think it was earlier this year. But it's an opportunity where volunteers who, love the military, love the Coast Guard, can sign up and talk about what CGMA does, and maybe like have a booth at the local commissary on a Saturday, just a table, and tell people, hey, this is what the military aid societies do if you want to learn a bit more. And our staff could help, anybody go through that training program and talk a little bit intelligently about what we do at CGMA. But I imagine that also exists among the other relief societies. Over.
Yeah, I think for me, we're all a little different because I got this a lot my first year. Like, hey, I can't give money. I want to volunteer, but I go back. It's in my perspective. I look at that wraparound service the same way. If you're near a base, go volunteer at the base. It's for the Army, and I'll give my own personal example as my wife. The Army Emergency Relief does not own the thrift stores, unlike the Navy and Marine Corps does. My wife, for years, has volunteered at the thrift store on the Army bases. So where we don't have, because we support those that do, I would say volunteer on an installation. And unfortunately, if you're way out there at those and you're not near an installation, unfortunately, we don't have those volunteer opportunities unless you're going to volunteer at the Guard or the Reserve Center if they need help. And that's where I would go because we're part of the Army. You volunteer at a Guard or a Reserve Center if you're in some kind of remote area. That would be the only advice for you, because if you say Army Emergency Relief, volunteers, we don't have a lot on the books, unlike, and I know the Navy and the Marine Corps actually does, but we don't.
Again, I just want to thank you each for the time that you've spent today to be able to educate the Got Your Six Network and hopefully be able to share some of those larger roles and efforts that you guys do. And so, Janet, looks like we have you now. So if you'll come off mute and turn on your video.
Janet Covington, and I'm also representing the Cohen Veterans Network in Hawaii. So my question is, if you could speak a little bit more to the scholarships that you all offer, because I see it on the back of Tony on his sign, and we're asked about scholarships quite a bit.
We would love to get you information, Jan. I'm sure all of us can send you information, but we do two primary kinds of scholarships. We do Hap Arnold scholarships. He was our founder, 5-star general of the Air Force, Air Corps guy, to be able to take care of spouses and dependents for full-time education. But then we have another kind of scholarship we call a B. Arnold scholarship, that not only does it provide for almost any kind of certification or training that will help that spouse and help that family, but it also, if requested, comes along with a child care stipend each semester. So not only do we give them the scholarship, but we want to help them with the child care so they can focus on school. And we would love to get you more. So aloha and mahalo for the question, Janet.
We do a lot in scholarships, and it's gone up and down. I think last year, I don't think we did over almost $9 million in scholarships in the Army Emergency Relief. So all our scholarships are needs based. Meaning if you need money, we're going to help you out to get you through the education. But we help spouses and their children. Active duty soldiers, actually, I told them, hey, go sign up for tuition assistance. That's how I got my degree. Go to school at night, you got the GI Bill. So we don't normally come in and help active duty soldiers. So this that 8 million usually is spouses and their children, and retirees fall into those, or surviving spouses. I will put a little caveat on the scholarships sometimes, because people say, "Oh, I've had this from soldiers. Army Emergency Relief. I don't want to, give money for scholarships." Sometimes I go, "Well, you don't." So, I say that because we're really proud of our scholarships, but I do remind everybody sometimes, like Ed probably was talking about, those are restricted funds. We actually have one, 9/11. They came in and said, if any of these kids ever, need money for scholarships, that's going to be funded, and we want AER to manage that, and it's a restricted fund. So when I tell you that number, some of that number of those funds for scholarships are restricted, and it was given by a specific donor, because some people would say, "Why are you doing this?" Because somebody trusted us with the money to manage that, to get it to those soldiers and their family members, and it's restricted only for scholarships. So that normally doesn't come out a lot, but I do want to caveat that, and I wanted to give the category of who our scholarships go to.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for chiming in on those couple of questions. But again, I just want to say thank you to our panelists and to everybody who attended the webinar today. I really encourage you to check out our Got Your Six Network directory, which I know Corey has linked in the chat, and connect with not only the Air Force Aid Society, the Army Emergency Relief, the Coast Guard Mutual Assistance, and the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, but all the other 350 plus organizations that make up the network to support those who each of you serve. As I mentioned, in the coming weeks, we'll be sending out a recording, and really appreciate your time today. And thank you all so much for sharing more about your individual organizations. We really appreciate it.